Welcome back, guys. In this video, we are going to study and look at some of the special addresses that are present in classes and the blocks that we read about in the classful and the classless addresses. There are some certain blocks and certain addresses that are reserved for certain specific purposes. So let us begin and have a look at them. So first of all, I would like to tell you about the all zeros address. So what is the meaning of all zeros address is that let's suppose there is one host that is there and it does not know its own IP. So what it does is it's just that and it wants to send an IP packet to some destination address. So first of all, it would like to know its IP. So in order for it to like identify like what is my IP address, it sends a packet with the destination address 255.255.255.255 and its own source address as the all zeros address and destination address as this particular address to a specific server which we call as DHCP server, which we will see in the further part of our modules. So what happens is that in or after some time DHCP server returns the IP address of that particular host, whichever wants to send the packet, and after it receives its own IP address, it sends the particular packet that it wants to send, and it is normally used at the time of bootstrap. At the time of bootstrap, normally what happens is that the host is not knowing its own IP address, so it sends in order to know its own IP address, it sends an IP address. It sends a packet using this IP address as a source IP and this IP address as a destination IP. Okay, now moving on. All one's address. What is the meaning of all one's address? So all one's address is generally the limited broadcast address. We also know it as limited broadcast address. What happens is that let's suppose if I am this host and I use this particular destination IP as a destination IP, then what will happen? It will be broadcasted to all the hosts that are present in that particular network, and the router which is like located for that particular network will work as the blocker, and it will block that particular packet to be moved out, to get moved out of this particular network. So it will only be it will the packet that this particular host send over there, it will only be broadcasted to this particular network that is there. It will not move out of the network. So that is it about the all ones address. Moving on, there is one specific block uh, in the in the class A, which is known as 127.0.0.0, and this particular address is used as a loopback address. What happens is that let's suppose if this there is some application it wants to test its IP software that whichever that has there is one application that is being built and it wants to check its IPv4 software. So it sends some packet, and using this particular address, which is 127.0.0.0 as the destination address, and that particular IP will never move out of the machine. It will just circle back from it will move to the network layer and it will circle loop back to the process itself. So that is what happens, and that is why it is known as the loopback address. And in this case, a packet never leaves the machine or the host machine, and it simply looks back to the protocol software from wherever it was being called. And as I told you, like it is generally used to test the softwares that are built. Moving on, there are certain private addresses that are there, so which are basically reserved for some private use, and a few of them are like mentioned over here. Okay, you can go through them if you want to know more about them. Moving on, there is also known there are some addresses that are blocked that are used for the multicast addresses. The block which is this 224.0.0.0/4. 4 is like I told you, it's basically belonging to not 4. It's just this particular block that is 224. It belongs to class D. If you will check, if you will just check its class, then it will belong to class C. And as I earlier told you, like class C IP addresses are generally used for multicast communication. So that is what has been given over there as well. Okay. Now moving on, there are special addresses, whatever addresses that we read in the classful addressing and the in the classical addressing, there are certain addresses that are used for network identification and subnet identification addresses, which I told you, like the first address in each network of each class network is used as the identification IP address for that particular network. And in case of subnet, that is used as the first IP of each subnet is used for the identification of that particular subnetwork. So that is why those first addresses are used for generally used for the network address identification and subnetwork address identification. And the last address, like I earlier told you that this thing as well, like the last address of each network is generally used as a direct broadcast address. So as you can see in this picture, like this is a class C IP. Okay, and in the class C, the last byte is being used as the last byte is used for the host address. So the first three, as you will see, this last byte, we have 255 as a destination IP, which is the last address for this particular network, 71 network, 221.45.71. So for this 71 number network, this is the last IP address. And if we send some packet, yeah, some packet from the outside world to the network using this particular IP, then this particular packet will be distributed and broadcasted among the whole network that is there. So that is the case for broadcast as direct broadcast address. So that is all in the spatial addresses part. Thank you so much for watching. In the next video, we'll discuss about the NAT, which is network address translation.